How's it going, everyone? Twonky here, and today I'm going to be ranking the Fallout 4 perks in a tier list. Obviously, this is all my opinion, but that opinion has been formed after thousands of hours playing Fallout 4. That being said, while I have used all the perks in the game, there are certainly ones that I'm less experienced with, and I'll try to point those out when we get to them. Let me know in the comments if there are any perks you think I've grossly misjudged, or if you agree or disagree with any of the rankings. And this will just be the perks in the special chart, so we're not going to be going over things like companion perks or DLC perks. And I've got them organized down here in special order, so we'll start with the strength perks 1 through 10, followed by perception, and then endurance, and so on. So, with 70 perks to go through, we'd better get a move on. Starting with Strength 1, Iron Fist, which increases your unarmed damage, both bare fists and unarmed weapons. And while unarmed is definitely a viable strategy and can be a very strong build, I do think that it is generally weaker than pretty much all or almost all the other kind of weapon damage perks. So while it is good, I think I'm going to put it in C tier, mainly because even something like Big Leagues just outclasses it. There are so many more melee weapons, and just in general melee is better than fists. That being said, if you haven't done a fists or an unarmed build, I do recommend it. The third-person animations, especially when you're doing just bare fists, are really cool. It can still be a strong build, but the other weapon types are just kind of better. Which brings us to Big Leagues, which is an easy A tier. Like I said, melee is just really good in Fallout 4, especially when you get to, I think, rank 4 or 5 of Big Leagues, and your melee hits can hit multiple enemies at once. It's just absolutely insane, especially when you combine it with Blitz. And then we have Armorer, which allows you to upgrade your armor, and that to me is an S tier. This is probably the perk I use the most, regardless of what kind of build I'm making. It's most likely going to have armor, because armor is useful for basically every build. Even if its only use was being able to add ballistic weave to clothing. That to me is almost enough to make it an S tier. But if you're doing a power armor build, you need armor to be able to upgrade your power armor. And even if you're doing like a sneak build and not really relying on damage resistance, armor still lets you craft useful armor mods like muffled or deep pocketed. So yeah, just a really strong perk that fits into basically any build. Blacksmith, I'm gonna say Blacksmith is... I'm torn between A and B tier. I mean, melee builds are really strong, and if you're doing a melee build, you're most likely going to be using Blacksmith to upgrade your melee weapons. So I'm gonna say Blacksmith... I don't know, I'm feeling it's maybe B tier, probably like B plus, A minus maybe. I think upgrading melee weapons in general isn't as important as upgrading guns. The thing that might push this higher into A tier are some of the later game mods that you can put onto things like the baseball bat and stuff like that. So you could make an argument for A tier for sure. Heavy Gunner I'm also going to say is B tier. Which might surprise you, considering I not that long ago did a heavy weapons only build that ended up being really ridiculous and really fun to play. But I think if I'm being honest, heavy weapons are just not quite as practical as something like melee or automatic or semi-automatic weapons. And a lot of the heavy guns tend to be harder to use. Like the Cryolator, the Harpoon Gun, and the Broadsider, for example. All very, very strong weapons. I think the Cryolator especially is one of the strongest weapons in the game, but they're all kind of hard to aim. Like with the Broadsider and the Harpoon Gun, they have bad reload times. Yeah, I think B tier fits for heavy weapons. Strongback, I'm gonna say, is an A tier perk, especially on survival difficulty, where they give you decreased carry weight. It's really nice to kind of offset that with Strongback. Plus the higher ranks of Strongback allow you to basically carry as much stuff as you want, and when you combine it with other perks that manage your AP drain, like Action Boy or Moving Target, you can run for really long distances before your AP drains while being over encumbered. And then adding like Sprinter's gear on top of it makes it really great too. Steady Aim. So Steady Aim is a perk I actually really like to use. I think it's a lot of fun, especially on a commando build, but it really is not very necessary. So while I like it, I feel like it belongs in D tier. And yeah, I don't feel like that's a too controversial choice. The final rank gives you an extra 5% damage when firing without aiming down sights, and I don't know, I feel like that's just straight up worse than Bloody Mess, which isn't a great perk to begin with. Maybe if they made it 10% or higher, it'd be okay. Basher. Basher, I'm gonna put Basher at C tier. It feels a little weird to put it at the same level as Iron Fist. So I'm gonna maybe say like Iron Fist would be like a C+, and Basher is like a C-. But you can actually get pretty decent damage out of Basher, or out of gun bashing. The final rank of it gives you a 15% chance of landing a critical, and if you combine that with Overdrive, it gives you a 40% chance of landing critical hits when gun bashing. You can use things like lucky weapons or energy weapons that have modifications that increase your critical damage multiplier, and you can actually get a really high damage output when gun bashing if you land a critical. So also gun bashing applies to using the minigun with the shredder on it, and that's just absurdly powerful. I think the only thing that struggles with is Mirelurks. So for that, I feel like Basher belongs in C tier, but like I said, C-. Rooted, I'm gonna say, is B tier. I think it's a solid perk if you're doing a melee build, and it combines nicely with Blitz. But like, if you don't take it, you probably aren't gonna notice a huge difference on your melee builds. So for that, I think it's, I don't know, it's solid B tier, but not amazing. Pain Train, I'm gonna say is, I feel like Pain Train's probably C tier. It's a lot of fun to use. It's not a perk I use very often, but it doesn't really feel super practical, and it kind of feels bad that they put a power armor perk at strength 10, considering that just being in power armor automatically sets your strength to 11. So every point you put into strength while using power armor just kind of feels wasted. Yeah, the perk investment it takes to get to it is kind of wasted, but the perk itself is a lot of fun to use. Pickpocket. I feel like Pickpocket is, I almost want to put it in F tier. We're in the perception perks, by the way. I guess I'll put Pickpocket in D tier, because, I don't know, you can do things like steal unique clothing off of NPCs if you want to like build up your collections, then that's kind of neat. And being able to reverse pickpocket grenades or poison caltrops on enemies is a lot of fun, so it's not completely useless like some of the F tier perks are going to be, but it's definitely like not as good as pickpocketing in, say, Skyrim, for example. You're not going to use it a whole lot. A lot of it is just kind of niche cases. Rifleman is A tier. It's just one of the best ways to deal damage in the game. Sniping is really good, or just even using, you know, a semi-automatic rifle with reflex sight is really strong. It's very ammo efficient, and at later ranks of Rifleman, your shots ignore damage resistance, or a percentage of damage resistance, and that's really good. Awareness, I'm gonna say, is D tier. It's pretty cool to be able to VAT scan enemies and see details about them like their level and resistances, but overall it doesn't really change the way you play that much, at least it didn't in my experience. I took this perk kind of a bit later in my VATS only run, and it was neat, I'm glad I took it, but I don't know, are you really going to use awareness and then take that information and swap to an energy weapon if you're using a ballistic weapon? I don't know. And plus, if you already have that game knowledge, like if you already know that Yao Guai take more energy damage than ballistic damage, then you don't need awareness. Locksmith. I'm gonna say Locksmith is a B tier perk. I think I'm kind of lower on Locksmith than a lot of players are. It's certainly not a bad perk, but I don't consider it a necessary perk. I think a lot of builds, especially for new players in the game, tend to go for Perception of 4 for like the specific reason of getting Locksmith. In my opinion, I think that's a mistake. I feel like if you're already going to be in Perception, maybe for something like Demolition Expert, then yeah, you might as well, put points to the Locksmith to get some extra loot or have some shortcuts. But you're really not going to be missing out on much if you don't take Locksmith. More often than not, you get to open an Advanced or Expert level safe, and you'll get some pre-war money, a few 38 rounds, a silver fork, and like a pipe weapon. Like, you can do without that stuff. Demolition Expert, I'm gonna say, is A tier. It's like, explosives are just really good. Placing mines, throwing grenades are really strong in Fallout 4, and the fact that it really nicely combines with like a primary damage perk like Rifleman, since you're gonna have your grenades on a separate key, it makes it a solid addition to almost any build. Night Person, I'm gonna say Night Person's like a D tier perk. Getting extra perception and intelligence at night is fine, but it's not really that game-changing. And the extra health you get at night also is like, it's okay, but doesn't make that big of a difference. And the night vision can actually be kind of annoying. And then was this Refractor? It gives you energy resistance. I'm gonna say that's also D tier. It's too high up the perception chart for what it does. You only get like 10 points of energy resistance per perk, and later in the game, that really isn't going to be doing a whole lot for you, especially if you have like Ballistic Weave or if you're using Power Armor. So yeah, it's just not very good. Sniper, I'm going to say, is like a C tier perk. Each rank of it is fairly useful, but one thing I kind of came across when doing my VATS only run is I kind of wanted to get to rank 3 of Sniper, which gives you increased headshot hit percentage, but the first 2 ranks of it would have been completely useless for my VATS build. The first rank gives you a less AP drain when aiming with a scope, and you don't really use that in VATS. And the second one gives you a chance to knock down an enemy, which probably wouldn't have really come into play. But like, I don't know, I feel like they're useful enough that it's not quite D tier. And the knockdown effect for scoped semi-automatic rifles actually has some nice synergy with the combat shotgun. If you put a scope on the combat shotgun, it is a scoped rifle. And so that gives each pellet a chance of knocking down the enemy, which can be kind of hilarious. Penetrator, I'm gonna say Penetrator it's A tier, I think. I think that's where it belongs. Being able to just wall hack enemies is just absurdly powerful if you're doing a VATS build. You can just be on the other side of a wall, use Penetrator to target an enemy in VATS, and then if you have a crit available, use a critical, and you're guaranteed to hit them. I did that all the time in my VATS only run, and it's really strong. Concentrated Fire I also think is A tier for a VATS build. It ensures that you will hit the enemy. Without Concentrated Fire, you can like do a whole, line up all your shots in VATS and you can just get unlucky and not hit anything. But Concentrated Fire really takes away that risk, and also the increased damage you get at higher ranks of it for like repeat shots on the same limb is really strong. And similar to Refractor, I'm going to say Toughness. We're now into Endurance perks. This one is basically the same, but it gives you ballistic or like physical damage resistance. I think it's definitely stronger than Refractor, but still a D tier perk. You could make the argument that it has uses in the early game where good armor isn't as available. So if you put like a point or two of it in the early game, it can help you out. But again, like late game, you're not going to really notice a big difference from it. Lead Belly is F tier. That is an easy F tier. Even on survival difficulty, you do not need Lead Belly. I've run across comments both like on YouTube and forums like Reddit where people make the claim that, on survival difficulty, since food and drink are important, Lead Belly is actually a good perk. And that is completely untrue. Lead Belly is still terrible on survival difficulty. I've done many survival runs, and I've never needed Lead Belly. On most of my survival runs, I never have to resort to eating irradiated food. There's plenty of animals out there that you can kill and cook their meat to make it not irradiated. Plenty of enemies and containers have things like crispy squirrel bits or iguana on a stick. There's so much available food-wise that is not irradiated. And water is really easy to come by on survival too. So you never need to use Lead Belly. For whatever reason, even if you don't have non-irradiated food, there's wild mute fruit everywhere, and that only gives you 2 rads. You really don't need a perk to mitigate those 2 rads. So yeah, Lead Belly is awful. Life Giver, I'm gonna say it's a C tier perk, maybe like a low C tier. I'm mainly putting it here because the 3rd rank of Life Giver gives you passive health regen, and if you combine that with other health regeneration perks in the game, it can be pretty solid. But most of the time you're probably better off in the long run just putting more points into endurance and increasing your health that way. Chem Resistant, to me Chem Resistant is like between F and D tier. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in D tier though. The only time I found Chem Resistant useful myself is when doing You Only Live Once, and that's only because the rules of You Only Live Once are that addictions are incurable. Otherwise, it is almost totally unnecessary. Especially since you only get the withdrawal effects of addiction when you're not actively under the effect of whatever chem you're addicted to. So if you take a Psycho Buff and get addicted, then all you need to do is just keep taking Psycho Buff and you don't experience the withdrawal effects. And you can just keep doing that until you find a doctor to take care of addiction. I don't know, addiction is just like a minor inconvenience at worst. That Chem Resistant is just not really necessary. Aqua Boy. So Aqua Boy is a perk that if you're not playing on survival, it's probably like D tier. And if you are playing on survival, it's like B to A tier. So I'm just gonna put Aqua Boy in C tier. I do like taking it on most of my survival runs. It's just really nice to just be able to use water to, you know, get from location to location on survival mode. But I mean, it's mainly like a convenience perk. You can get by without it. But it is pretty good on survival. Non-survival difficulties, it's almost totally useless in my opinion, since Radaway is plentiful and there are no like negative side effects from Radaway. Rad Resistant, I'm gonna say Rad Resistant's another F tier perk. I don't think I've ever found it useful. Just use like armor to put lead lined or something on your clothes or take a Rad-X. But yeah, getting 10% radiation resistance per perk is just not very good, especially when you consider how much radiation resistance you get from like the hazmat suit or power armor. Adamantium Skeleton, I think I used to be kind of higher on it than I am now. Adamantium Skeleton's probably a C tier perk. It is pretty nice to not have to worry about healing a crippled limb in the middle of a firefight. So yeah, I do think it's pretty good. Cannibal, I'm gonna also say is an F tier perk. I think really the only reason to take Cannibal is if you're doing some sort of challenge run or a meme run or something like that. But like as far as practical usefulness, it really doesn't have any, and it's also one of the few perks that gets way worse if you're playing on survival. Once you eat your first human body with the Cannibal perk on survival, you then get like Dark Hunger. And when you go hungry, you immediately go into famished status, which decreases your endurance by 8. And you only get out of that state if you eat another a person. So yeah, it's F tier. Ghoulish, I'm gonna say Ghoulish is... I kind of want to put Ghoulish in D tier. The final rank is okay, especially when you combine it with Life Giver. Like having a perk that heals you whenever you take radiation damage is kind of like counterproductive, and I think too niche to really be useful. If I ever do take Ghoulish, and I have taken it before, it's when the rest of my build is already complete and I don't know what else to put perk points into. That's really the only time I use Ghoulish. Solar Powered, I'm gonna say is a B tier perk. I think getting extra endurance and strength during the day, like those are both really strong special attributes on their own. So I think that's good, definitely better than Night Person. And then the passive radiation healing you get during the day is also pretty nice. And I think it heals your health as well. So yeah, it combines really great with Life Giver too. And then we get to Cap Collector, which I'm gonna say, it's not a perk I use often, but I feel like it probably goes into B tier. If you're kind of more of a like kind of settlement, local leader style build, then the final rank of being able to invest into stores around the Commonwealth is really nice to have. And I think having Cap Collector also unlocks certain buildings in your settlements. So I think it's useful enough that it belongs in B tier. This is what, Lady Killer / Black Widow? I'm gonna say this is like a D tier perk. You get like, what, 5% more damage against enemies of the opposite sex per rank, which is not a lot of damage to begin with, and it's gonna affect like less than half of the enemies you fight, since things like animals and creatures don't have a gender in Fallout 4. So yeah, it's just too weak to really be useful in my opinion. Lone Wanderer, that is S tier. Lone Wanderer does pretty much everything you want, especially on survival difficulty. You get increased carry capacity, a percentage less damage, which is much better than just damage resistance. And at what, the third rank you get is 25% more damage, which is absurd. And then what, the fourth rank gives you 25 more AP, which is, you know, nothing to shake a stick at either. So yeah, it just does so much for a perk. Easy S tier right there. Attack Deck I feel like is a perk I don't use as often as I probably should. But if you're rolling with Dogmeat, I feel like it's, I don't know, I'm gonna maybe put it in B tier, but you could make an argument for A tier. It makes Dogmeat pretty useful, and the final rank of it gives you another 10% damage reduction. And that stacks with Lone Wanderer because you still get the benefits of Lone Wanderer when you have Dogmeat. So I feel like it's solid, but maybe not quite A tier. Animal Friend, I've just never found these like intimidation style perks very useful personally. They don't work often enough in my experience that you can really rely on them. And if I'm pointing my weapon at an enemy, I'm better off normally just like taking them out than like trying to like give them commands or make them freeze in their tracks or whatever. I haven't used them very often, so maybe I'm completely wrong. But I don't know, I just feel like they're just not terribly useful unless maybe you're doing some kind of challenge run like a no-kill run. Local Leader I think is pretty easily an A tier perk. It's a no-brainer if you're going to be focusing on settlements at all. Being able to set up supply lines, and also the second rank of it allowing you to build crafting stations, both are very useful if, you know, that's what your playthrough or build is focused on. Party Boy, I'm gonna say is like a B tier perk. This is another perk I don't have a whole lot of experience using, but I have heard really good things about it. If you're doing some kind of like VATS focused melee build, being able to get extra luck while being drunk, and also having alcohol like double the effects. Like Dirty Wastelander would end up giving you like +6 strength, which is pretty crazy. So I think Party Boy does have a lot of potential. I could be totally wrong about this, and maybe I'm just overestimating it because I haven't actually used it. Inspirational, I'm gonna also say is probably a B tier perk. I don't tend to use companions a whole lot, so this is also not a perk I have a lot of experience using. But I mean, if you are a companion focused playstyle, then, you know, being able to equip them with explosives and not worry about taking damage from your companions, I mean, it'll increase their effectiveness against enemies while also keeping you safe. And I think that's pretty good. And then Wasteland Whisperer and Intimidation, I'm gonna put into D tier as well, for the same reason as Animal Friend. I'll zoom out a little bit here as these kind of fill up. Now we have Intelligence perks. Vans, yeah, that's another F tier. There's already map markers for quests. You don't really need Vans telling you where to go. And rank 2 gives you like 2 perception, which I guess is okay. It feels kind of weird though, like investing 2 points into an intelligence perk to get 2 points of perception. I don't feel like it's too controversial to put Vans as F tier. Medic, I'm gonna say, is a B tier perk. I think it's especially useful on like a tanky survival build, especially when you get to rank 4 of Medic at level 49. That increased healing rate on survival is just really strong, and it puts the healing rate of stim packs at like just the right amount that you can like preemptively take a stim pack before a big fight. And if you're built for it, enemies are gonna have a hard time dealing enough damage to like fight through the healing power of that stim pack. If you're not playing on survival, I almost feel like rank 4 of Medic it's almost bad because it heals you too quickly. But yeah, I think Medic it's solid. Gun, I'm also gonna put into B tier. Being able to upgrade weapons is really good, but I mean, it's also kind of a convenience perk because you can, go to like weapon shops or find weapons on enemies that have mods and strip them off of the weapon you found them on and put them on kind of your main weapon and not need gun nut. In my opinion, I personally like having gun nut around to not have to rely on that and just be able to craft the weapons how I want to. Hacker, I'm gonna say, is like C tier. It's kind of like Locksmith, but in my opinion, not useful as often as Locksmith. So yeah, I feel like it's like a C tier perk. I don't think it's worth going to 4 intelligence for the specific reason of getting Hacker. But if you're already there, then maybe you'll take it. But personally, I end up taking Locksmith way more often than I take Hacker. Scrapper, I'm gonna say, is a B tier perk. It's one of those perks where if you don't take it, you're usually gonna be fine. But I've never regretted taking Scrapper. And I don't know, maybe it's just like the dopamine hit of being able to scrap a bunch of guns and just watch all these resources go into your workbench. Yeah, Scrapper is just one of those perks that always feels good to use. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. Science. Yeah, Science is an A tier perk. Allows you to upgrade energy weapons and also has some really useful unlocks for things you can craft in your settlements. It allows you to get, better power generators and better water purifiers. Also allows you to craft more advanced power armor mods. If you're doing a power armor build, Science is almost like mandatory. Chemist is an S tier perk. Chems are one of the strongest things in the whole game. Being able to unlock more powerful chems with Chemist rank 1 like Fury or Overdrive or Jet Fuel is especially good on survival mode. And then having them last 3 times as longer if you've fully invested in Chemist is just insane. With Chemist, you can easily be on the effects of Buff Tat and Psycho Buff and Jet Fuel for like the entire playthrough, which is just crazy. And making Jet last longer is really nice too. Plus, even if we're not talking about the actual chems, like on survival mode, Chemist allows you to craft Refreshing Beverage, which is one of the best healing items in the game. And it allows you to craft Poison Caltrops, which is one of the best ways to make money in the game. So, yeah, easily an S tier there. Robotics Expert? I feel like Robotics Expert is probably on the same level as like Gun Nut and Blacksmith. I feel like robots along with Chemist are probably like the 2 strongest kind of like game mechanics in the game. So I think for that reason you could make an argument for putting Robotics Expert in A tier. Yeah, I mean, you can make a robot companion that will like insta-kill any enemy in the game, like Ancient Behemoths, Mythic Deathclaws, just like gone in a snap. So the perk that allows you to do that, I feel like, you know what, let's just put it in A tier. Personal biases aside, I've just convinced myself that Robotics Expert is an A tier regardless of how often I've used it in the past. Nuclear Physicist, I'm gonna say like B tier, I think. On a power armor build, it's really, really useful. So, I mean, on other builds, it's obviously not, but I feel like that's the case for a lot of perks, even some of these in A tier. And then having it increase the damage of things like gamma guns or radium rifles is also pretty nice. And the allowing you to eject fusion cores as grenades, while it is very risky and you're likely to kill yourself, it's also a lot of fun. Nerd Rage, I'm also going to say, is a B tier perk. It's like having the Martyrs effect without having to like use up a legendary armor spot. And the healing rate for killing enemies at the kind of the final rank of Nerd Rage is pretty nice for survivability. And then now we have Agility, Gunslinger. Gunslinger's A tier. Pistols are great in Fallout 4, and I legitimately think that the 10mm pistol is one of the best weapons in the game. It's crazy that they give it to you so early. Gunslinger's just good. Pistols are good. I don't know what else there is to say. Commando is also A tier. Automatic weapons are strong, maybe not quite as ammo efficient as something like Riflemen, but they're fun to use and they're very powerful. So increasing damage from automatic weapons, yeah, easily an A tier in my opinion. Sneak, yeah, Sneak is also A tier. This is a Bethesda game. Sneak builds are going to be really, really good. Even if it's not totally my preference to do Sneak, I do prefer more tanky builds, but you can't deny that. Yeah, Sneak is a really strong playstyle. Mr. Sandman, I feel like Mr. Sandman is like a C tier perk. It's like Ninja, but worse. You're almost never gonna end up like using the ability to kill an enemy in their sleep. And so like the only usefulness of it is to increase your sneak attack multiplier on only silenced weapons. So yeah, C tier I feel like is where it belongs. Like, it's good, but it's not like amazing. Action Boy / Action Girl, that's an A tier. It's useful on almost any build, especially useful on a VATS build. This was like my highest priority perk when I did VATS only, as refresh and AP was such a priority for that build. But even if you're not using a VATS build, especially on survival mode where you're running everywhere, being able to get that AP refilled after sprinting in a more timely manner is just really nice to have. Moving target, I'm gonna say moving target is like a C tier. The main usefulness I find for moving target is if I'm going for an infinite carry weight build. The final rank of moving target gives you decreased AP drain when sprinting, but that does apply to running while over encumbered if you have strong back rank 3 or strong back rank 5. Even though it says sprinting on the perk description, it counts for running while over encumbered too. The earlier levels of taking less damage when running or when sprinting is okay, but I don't know, I don't feel like it comes up that often. Ninja, yeah, Ninja's A tier. Increasing your critical multiplier, yeah, no brainer A tier. Especially with melee weapons, making your critical multiplier 10 times is just super good. Ninja is also part of the reason why I put Iron Fist in C tier, because the 10 times multiplier only applies to melee weapons, but I believe unarmed weapons get the same lower sneak attack multiplier as guns. This is Quick Hands. I'm gonna say Quick Hands is... I want to put it in B tier. I'll take the first rank of a Quick Hands if I have enough agility for it on almost any build. I mean, being able to reload faster just gives you more DPS and makes it so that there's less time where you're vulnerable to enemies. Blitz is S tier. That shouldn't be a surprise. Blitz is just so absurdly powerful. Even though my personal preference is to not use VATS when doing a melee build, I can't deny how strong Blitz is. It takes away the main drawback of using melee, which is having to close the distance between yourself and the enemies. So both taking that away and also giving you more damage the further away you are from enemies is just, yeah, Blitz is just crazy. Gun Fu, I'm gonna put in C tier. I think when it's good, it's really good, but most of the time it just kind of does nothing. Gun Fu gives you like increased damage, and then at higher ranks gives you automatic criticals the more enemies you target in VATS, but you have to have enough AP that you're able to target enough enemies for it to work. So I mean that'll require you to have, to be using a weapon that has a low AP cost enough for it, and you also have to be in a situation where you're able to target that many enemies. And because of that, I feel like C tier is where it belongs. Fortune Finder, I'm gonna say is, I don't know, I feel like there are so many other good ways of making money that I kind of want to put Fortune Finder in D tier. Home stretch, we're into the luck perks now. Yeah, there's plenty of good ways to make money in Fallout 4 that Fortune Finder isn't terribly necessary, though, I mean, similar to Scrounger, there is that nice dopamine hit when you do find more caps in containers, so maybe you could make the argument for C tier. Scrounger. I'm gonna say Scrounger's a B tier perk. Finding more ammo in containers is good, and it's like almost just strictly better than Fortune Finder, because you can just sell the extra ammo you find that you don't need and make caps that way. But yeah, this is like, especially if I'm doing a commando automatic weapons build, this is like the perk I prioritize the most. What do we have here? Bloody Mess. I'm gonna say Bloody Mess is like C tier. I don't know, it's the perk you take when you don't really have anything else to spend on. Kind of one of those perks. But only 5% more damage per rank, so it's not the best, but it's not bad, I guess. Mysterious Stranger. I kind of feel like Mysterious Stranger is an F tier. Maybe it should be D tier, maybe it's not that bad, but it just seems like it's not consistent enough to where it's like good enough in the early game, and then like as you get into the late game and you can put higher ranks into it, you just don't really need it, because if you're a VATS focused build, you're going to be wiping everything out yourself with all the other really strong VATS perks. So while it's cool, it's always fun to see the Mysterious Stranger show up, it just isn't useful or consistent enough to be really worth it, in my opinion. And Idiot Savant, I feel like it's one of the most polarizing perks in the game. It seems like you either love it or you hate it. Personally, I love it, so it's going up into S tier. It's a perk where if you are already if you already have enough luck, taking Idiot Savant is a no-brainer. There's no reason not to take it if your build already has at least 5 luck. The points you spend into it are going to repay themselves, and then some. And it's one of the few perks where I will, on certain builds, I will go into 5 luck specifically for Idiot Savant, even if I'm not using VATS in that build. And I mean, luck as a stat has no usefulness outside of VATS, so I think that speaks to the power level of Idiot Savant. Plus, if you're going for like a really like power leveling run where you want to get as high a level as possible, like using Gunner Cages to farm XP, rank 3 of Idiot Savant is vital for that strategy, and in my opinion is like the best way to level up. Yeah, S tier is where I think it goes. Better Criticals I think is pretty easily an A tier, and it has some usefulness outside of VATS builds too. I use Better Criticals on builds where I know I'm going to be using Overdrive a lot. Like if I use the Righteous Authority outside of VATS, I can like pop an Overdrive, be getting double damage on my criticals from the Righteous Authority, and getting, increasing that multiplier with the Better Criticals perk. So yeah, it's good. Critical Banker I think is also an A tier perk. It's almost like vital to take this on a VATS run. I'm not really sure what else to say, like banking up criticals for future use is just really strong. Grim Reaper Sprint. So after doing my VATS only run, I'm going to go ahead and say Grim Reaper Sprint is an S tier perk. If you're doing a VATS heavy build, this thing is insane. At the final rank of Grim Reaper Sprint, you have basically a third chance, whenever you take out an enemy in VATS, of gaining a critical and refilling your AP bar. That is just like absurd, and you can... It just like keeps you going in VATS forever until like everyone is dead. Yeah, Grim Reaper Sprint is insane. I feel like 4-Leaf Clover is like maybe a C tier perk. Like the first rank of it is kind of useful, but I feel like it's just mainly outshined by Grim Reaper Sprint. And ranks 2 through 4 of 4-Leaf Clover give you kind of diminishing returns, so aren't really worth it. But I mean, the first rank is decent. To me, it's kind of between C and D. And I guess I'm feeling generous in this case, I'll put it in C tier. But it's like low C tier. And then finally Ricochet. I feel like Ricochet is like... It's like between D and F. I guess I'll put it in D tier. But it has kind of the same problem as Mysterious Stranger, where I don't think it activates frequently enough for it to be like really reliable. It is pretty funny when you do see a Ricochet happen, but it's just not... I don't know, it's not a very practical perk. It probably actually should be F tier, but it's also another perk I don't have really enough experience using it, so maybe that would be too harsh on it, so maybe D tier is the safer pick. Yeah, so, and then for whatever reason this perk list has an extra Wasteland Whisper, but we can just ignore that. So this is, yeah, the completed tier list. So if I had to pick like a winner and a loser, like the best perk and the worst perk, I would say the best perk to me is probably between Armor and Lone Wanderer. I think I would give the edge to Armorer because it's useful in more builds, and obviously Lone Wanderer is completely useless if you like using companions. Personally, I prefer to go companionless, so to me, it's like always on, and that's probably a big reason why I put it in S tier. And so for that reason, I feel like Armorer gets the edge. But yeah, I think Armorer is like, it's not like the flashiest perk, but I do feel like it is like the best perk in the game. And then, like, the worst perk in the game, I would probably say Lead Belly, to be honest. I don't know, maybe that's kind of why I get on my soapbox about, like, people saying it's useful in survival, because, in my opinion, it's just not. Like, I almost think Vans is more useful than Lead Belly, because at least at rank 2 of Vans, you get, like, 2 more, like, special points into Perception. So, there's my perk list. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know if there's anything you strongly disagree with. But yeah, there you have it. So, until next time, this has been Super Twonky. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave it a like. That really helps me out a lot. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, because that would be super cool. Until next time, hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.